The initial aim of this message series, Understanding the Bible, is to assist you, the potential Bible student, in overcoming the greatest hindrances to Bible study: its readability and its relevance. And I am confident that once these hurdles are overcome and the eagerness for Bible knowledge will emerge. In learning about the Bible, this message series is not designed for you to become Bible scholars. It's designed to give you a better understanding of the piece of literature that we know as the Bible. I want to emphasize today that the selection of books that went into the Bible were not chosen overnight. You see, the Bible itself is a collection of 66 books, and there are an uncounted number of additional books that were excluded from the 66. So those that were chosen went through a process called canonization. And the decision about which books were in and which books were out were also not made by a single group of people at a certain point in history. The selection of what went into what we know as the Bible took 300 years. So a book, in our understanding, is normally composed within one person's lifetime.
Right.
So this collection of all different authors were put together over a vast number of years, and it's important to understand that the intention of the writers was not to be on the New York bestsellers list. Okay, their intention was not that when I put this down on paper, somebody 3,000 years after this is going to be referring to. They were writing messages to a specific group of people who understood what they were talking about. And I want you to understand very clearly that the early church had no problem in understanding the book that we do today. And there are some reasons that they had no problems and we sometimes do. First of all, the people that they were talking to, they were well acquainted with that style of literature. And we're going to cover in today's lesson what some of that style of literature entailed. And also, they were living at a time when the symbols of the books and writings were familiar to them. Therefore, they understood because they had a context. They knew. They were familiar. They were close to it. Now, our difficulty with understanding the Bible is our unfamiliarity with ancient Semitic literature as a method of communicating a message. Also, we are far removed from the historical or cultural context of the times. There was a method of communicating a message that they understood that we do not. If we were to go back in time and try to explain to them what LOL means, they wouldn't have a clue. ROT. Rolling on the floor laughing. It's an acronym that, everybody uses in text messages. See, that's a form of communication that we're that we're familiar with. So, by us being familiar with texting, by us being familiar with Facebook, by us being familiar with technology, it means that we have an understanding of how to communicate a message. Now, there are several keys to understanding biblical literature that I want to share with you today. And there are 6 keys to understanding biblical literature. The first is the Aramaic language. Aramaic was the language, get this, of the Hebrew patriarchs. It was also the language spoken by Jesus. So we have to understand and get in our mind that when the Bible was actually written, it was written in the 3 primary languages. Those 3 primary languages were Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek. So it was not even, English was not even a concept at the time.
Right.
I also have to put this caveat to it, that before it was even written down, the stories were handed down by mouth. Okay, there was the oral tradition of telling the story over and over and over again. So in order for the history to be passed on, it was passed on through the colorful tradition of speech. And all of you are very, very aware that when a story is repeated, it never gets distorted.
Yeah.
It never gets changed. So the story was told year after year after year for centuries before it was even put on papyrus.
Right.
Then once it got put on the papyrus in these 3 different languages, it then had to be translated over into English. Now, we also have to be very, very clear that the English language sometimes has its flaws. Or sometimes has its phrases. So, here we are taking a oral tradition from a different language and then trying to transpose that into an entirely different language. So as translations were made, words were inappropriately used because they may have been more than one meaning for a particular word.
Right.
So the word that meant this in one language may not have meant that in a different language. So in understanding the literature, we have to know that it was originally coming from the Aramaic language. Now, all languages have idioms. An idiom is a peculiar expression of speech which says one thing but means something else. And all languages have them. They're pretty much known as figures of speech. An idiom in the English language would be, I paid an arm and a leg for this suit. An idiom would be to get it straight from the horse's mouth. Now, to my recollection, a horse hasn't spoken since the television show Mr. Head. So, these idioms were used throughout the scriptures as well. And we find many examples of idioms or figures of speech that what we try to do sometimes is to take it literally. One very, very important idiom I find in Luke, the 10th chapter and the 18th verse. And I'm choosing this one very, very strategically. It says, I beheld Satan as lightning falling from heaven. Falling from heaven. We have to understand that particular phrase is an idiom. It's a figure of speech, which simply means I saw truth conquered by evil. In the Semitic language or Semitic terms, it simply means losing one's power or influence. There was a lot of influence years ago. I'm going to give you a current day example of falling from heaven, losing the influence. The woman with all the makeup and her husband. What was her name?
Tammy Baker.
Huh?
Tammy Baker.
Yeah, Tammy Faye Baker. And Jim Baker, that was her husband's name. And all of the scandal and everything that went on behind that, that was a current day idiom or example of the idiom falling from grace. Someone losing their power or their influence. The third key that I want to present to you today is the Near Eastern culture. Near Eastern customs and manners can create mistaken impressions. And an understanding of the Near East customs is necessary to understand biblical literature. You have to understand the customs. Now, in understanding the customs, I am not wearing the right outfit for this today, but I can still do it. Okay. Whenever we go to the grocery store, okay, everybody when you check out, you get your groceries or whatever it is you're buying in those plastic bags, right? And everybody has a plastic bag with a lot of plastic bags in them at the house, right? Or is it just me? Okay, so that's how we leave the grocery store. The culture, the Semitic or Eastern culture, was to go to the market. All right? And they didn't have recyclable plastic bags. Now, there's a phrase that I've used a lot when it comes to blessing the offering, and that is, and you've heard this, that is being pressed down, shaken together, and running over. That doesn't make sense unless you understand Eastern culture, how they shopped at the market. Maybe. Okay. There was always loose-fitting garments. And so when they wanted flour or meal or something like that, instead of having the bags, they would say, here, put it in here like this. And once the meal was in there, to make sure, because they would only pay for how much ever they could fit in this amount. So for it to be pressed down, they got it in there and said, you know what, I can get a little bit more. Okay, go on, put some more in there. Shake it to make sure that there wasn't no air bubbles in there. You got, I put some more, go ahead, come on. So you have to understand the cultures. Okay. Whenever, also another thing that was not common in that time period was electricity. Duh. So, for there to be light, it had to be fire. And that was a major commodity. That was a precious commodity. So for Jesus to say, you are the light of the world, you have to understand, for them, that meant something. Because it was not common to just go over and turn on a light switch, meaning that you are important. So for you to be the light of the world, that's what today's daily word was talking about. You are valuable. So we have to understand the Near Eastern culture. Now the next thing that we have to understand in understanding the Bible as a piece of literature is biblical psychology. Biblical texts were composed in connection to the ancient communities in which they were written. For them specifically, because they were familiar with it. It's easy for us now to understand what the difference is, or it took me a while, my own experience, to understand what the difference in a water fountain and a water bubbler was.
A water fountain and what?
Water bubbler.
Oh.
It's the same thing, but in different parts of the country, where you go to get a drink of water was called a bubbler or a fountain. In some parts of the country, to this day, a Coca-Cola is called a soda, but in other places it's called a pop. So the culture and the psychology, or where the people were, determined what certain things were called. The psychology to discover the context of any book begin by identifying the facts about the people and the events mentioned. The psychology of a French fry is different in America than it is in Canada. I was at a restaurant in Canada and I ordered a burger and fries. Dealing with the psychology, how people see different things. I ordered a burger and fries and it came to me. And the waitress, being very, very polite, she said, is there anything I can get you? And I replied, yes, can I have some? Gentleman behind me said, that's so American. I didn't know that it was proper to put gravy on French fries.
Tastes good too.
It's a potato.
Yeah.
So the psychology of biblical things, knowing the context. We also must understand, the fifth thing that I want to present to you today is biblical symbology. The Semitic language is very visual, very flowery, very picturesque, and therefore highly symbolic. If we now are not aware of the symbols that were used for certain things, it makes it very, very difficult to understand. Example, in the Semitic language, in the Semitic culture, nations were symbolized as animals. So, a nation, if we were talking about, if they wanted to talk about a very powerful nation, they used the symbology of a lion or a bear or a leopard. So, if they wanted to talk about a nation or a country that was not as powerful, those nations were pictured as lamb, sheep, goats. That's why it's, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but okay, I'm going to go here. That's why people do not understand in the book of Revelation where it talks about where the lion will lie down with the lamb. You see, the biblical symbology, they weren't talking about animals, they were talking about nations. And saying very simply, as we would say today, can't we all just get along?
Yeah. Peace.
Peace. So, for the lion to lie down with the lamb is simply in Semitic language, meaning that the powerful and the not so powerful will be able to get along.
Right. That's peace down.
That's biblical symbology. And we don't get the real meaning of it because we don't know the symbology. Also, the other thing, dealing with literature, how things are written, we must understand amplification. Got to understand amplification. In the Eastern culture, it was totally acceptable to amplify or to exaggerate an event. It was very simple. I mean, it was common to exaggerate because they wanted to make it look more colorful, to make it a little more exciting.
Sure. Yeah.
How do we recognize or see amplification today? In sitcoms, they have those laugh tracks.
Yes.
Where they put the laugh in at the moment they want you to laugh. Making the event a little more comedic. Now, amplification is also recognized in the literature to over-exaggerate, to take it to the next level. If a person was in deep mourning, it was said, the person was in deep mourning, the sun refused to shine, and the moon and the stars no longer gave their light. But now, to express great joy, they would say something like, the mountains danced and the hills leaped and skipped and the trees clapped their hands.
Sure.
But I ain't never seen a tree with hands. But it was the amplification, just to take a look, to say that there was great joy. The mountains danced and the hills leaped. When we begin to understand these things, we can look at the Bible as a piece of literature as we are reading it. Now, not all writing in the Bible is good literature. I'm just going to keep it 100 with you, keep it real. It's not all easy to read. Generally speaking, when you want to look at some Bibles that do not read well, I want you to look at these. These is a good example of some that do not read well. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Those are some of the most difficult to read because when we're looking at those, especially in the book of Numbers and Leviticus, they're not what we would consider literature. It's basically the ancient way of doing Ancestry.com. You know, who begat who begat who, and then who married who, how many kids they had, and where they moved to. An example of a not easy to read chapter of Leviticus. And the Lord called unto Moses and spake unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, Speak unto all the children of Israel, and say unto them, If any man of you bring an offering unto the Lord, ye shall bring the offering of cattle, even of the herd and of the flock. If his offering be a burnt sacrifice of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own voluntary will at the door of the tabernacle at the congregation before the Lord. And he shall put his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be acceptable for him to make atonement for him, and he shall kill the bullock before the Lord, and the priest, Aaron's sons, shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood around about the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he shall flay the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. And the sons of Aaron, the priest, shall put fire upon the altar and lay the wood in order upon the fire. And the priest, Aaron's sons, shall lay in parts the head and the fat in order upon the wood that it is on the fire, which is upon the altar.
Phew. Wow.
Like, what? That is not an easy read. But that's what's in the Bible. But then when it comes to making burnt sacrifices and burnt offerings and knowing how to split the cattle and it also goes on to talk about not just the cattle. It tells if you're going to be giving a burnt offering of birds. But when we understand the culture in which that was written, that was simple for them. They understood that. That's what they did on a regular basis. But now, when you want some interesting reading, some well put together literature, I want you to look at the book of Job. The book of Esther. That is a wonderful story in itself. There is a group right now in Branson, Missouri, that has just taken that one book of the Bible and put it into an elaborate theatrical production. Psalms has some of the most beautiful poetry and songs ever written. Now, if you want to get down to some real racy stuff, start looking at the Songs of Solomon. Oh, now there you're going to find some stuff that will put all my children out of business.
Yeah.
Isaiah also has some very, very interesting reading in it. Luke and the Acts of the Apostles. Now, I can't leave them out because the Acts of the Apostles, that book of Acts, has some real good stuff to really get your attention. Now, if you want to hear some very, very interesting literature from the 8th chapter of Proverbs. Doth not wisdom cry, and understanding put forth her voice? She standeth at the top of the high places, by the way in the places of the path. She crieth at the gates, at the entry of the city, at the coming of the doors. Unto ye, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of man. O ye simple, understand wisdom, and ye fools, be ye of an understanding heart. Hear, for I will speak of excellent things, and the opening of my lips shall be right things. For my mouth shall speak truth, and wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are in righteousness. There is nothing frowned or perverse in them. They are all plain to him that understandeth, and right to him that findeth knowledge. Receive my instruction, and not silver or knowledge, rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may desired are not to be compared to it. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge of witty inventions. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride, and arrogance, and the evil way and the frowned mouth do I hate. Counsel is mine and sound wisdom. I am understanding. I have strength. By me kings reign and princes decree justice. By me princes rule and nobles, even all the judges on the earth. I love them that love me, and those that seek me shall find me. Riches and honor are with me, yea, durable riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold. This is good writing. This is good literature. It makes it easy to read, but it's difficult for some of us to understand the Bible because we're trying to read the book of Deuteronomy through the same lens that we would the Songs of Solomon. Now, I want to clarify something right now so everyone is clear and everyone understands this. This is our lineup for the next few weeks. Next Sunday, Ron and I will be in Port Huron. I will be performing a wedding in Port Huron next Sunday. So our speaker next Sunday is going to be Ben Justin. Okay? On the following week, which is August the 4th, Ron and I and my parents, we're going to be in Myrtle Beach at our family reunion. So I will not be here that Sunday. Those are the 2 Sundays that I will not be here. But on August the 4th, Reverend Mary Covington is going to be the speaker that Sunday. This series on understanding the Bible, I'm going to pick it back up on August the 11th with the lens of the prophetic. Now, those of you who are interested in Unity's approach to the book of Revelation, that would be a good Sunday for you to tune in. Those of you who are in serious prayer for our nation right now, you'd want to make sure that you hear the prophetic message on August the 11th. Okay? Now, coming right behind the prophetic lens, I need to lighten it up. I want you to see the comedy in the scripture. There are some things scripturally that are so comical you would not believe it. So on the 18th, I'm going to give you the comedic lens to interpret the Bible with. As a theater major in college, on August the 25th, I will give you the Bible through the dramatic lens. I did a little bit of that today with the literal, but you're going to really get the dramatic lens of Bible interpretation on August the 25th. In September, I want you to get ready for this. Back to basics. Back to basics. Okay, I'm going to give you the foundation of unity. Okay. That's what I'm going to deal with all through the month of September and maybe the first Sunday in October. I'm not quite sure yet. But that's where we're going with this series, and that's how we're going to be handling things. But now, go forward a little bit. Take me to the next slide. With the literature that is in the Bible, I want you to hear how biblical verses have been put to music and put to song. So Ron is going to share with us some biblical scripture that is in song. Thank you so much. Yeah.
From their ways heaven, then will I hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their ways, then will I hear from heaven, then will I hear from heaven and forgive their sins and heal their land. Prayer is the answer. Prayer is the answer for the world today. Prayer is the answer if we humble ourselves and pray.